Well, hello there. I'm Mr. Hale, and you've arrived to the Visual Art Expeditionary Force. Today, our focus is value. How can it help us in our drawings? How can it give us more power in our ability to shade? That's what we're going to try to understand and discover today. I have an artwork here. This is an acrylic painting that I did of my dog, Destin, some time ago. And you'll notice the background. It's kind of one particular turquoise type color, but there's some transition from light to dark. And that is what we want to talk about today. You'll also notice the dog. My dog is black, but there's lots of shades and degrees of gray mixed in with hints of the turquoise that's also in the background. We're going to explain why this is taking place, and then maybe you can learn some things from this drawing, and then I'm going to give you a couple of exercises to help you build your ability in shading and value. Some exercises you can do in your sketchbook or pile of papers that you've gathered at home. All right, let's take a closer look and see what we can discover. So you might be asking yourself, what is value? What is Mr. Hale talking about? Well, I'm talking about the transition of light to dark. Let's look at this sky, for example, in my sketchbook. All right, so we've got this darker blue in this corner. And notice what I'm doing as I come towards this part of the sky. I'm transitioning from a dark blue to a lighter blue. And then when you start to really look at the entire picture, you'll see that's a kind of a formula I'm using in a lot of different places. So I'm kind of dark in some edges, and then I blend out light. And if we look at this octopus falling through the sky, I know that's kind of strange and bizarre. Normal to me in my drawings when I draw from my imagination. You'll notice that there's parts of the tentacle that are kind of in shadow, or there's not a lot of light revealing what's going on. We understand the form, but on purpose, I don't mind it being in some darkness and some mystery there. And this also pushes it back in the background more. So that's stuff that we want to be aware of, and we want to understand how to utilize that power or how to use that power when we're drawing, whether it's from our mind or from reality. I wanted us to take a closer look at this painting that I did of my dog, Destin. You can really see there's a lot of manipulation of the paint, and I'm following that same thing I just explained in my sketchbook. So we have a different subject, a dog, a normal depiction of an animal that we would find. This is something a lot of people would maybe hang in their home. You know, it's not a strange octopus flying. That's okay. But how I'm mechanically handling the drawing is no different. I'm doing the same darkness in this corner, and as I come around or blend away from that corner, I'm transitioning into the lighter turquoise. So how do I shade, Mr. Hale? Well, I'm glad you're asking me. But I don't think you're going to like my answer. It requires two things that you're going to have to do. First, you're going to have to exercise extreme patience. I'm going to give you some activities, and you're going to have to be very patient. You cannot rush through value. To really understand it, you've got to step back and really self-reflect on what you're doing. And whether you're doing it right or wrong, you need to understand that. And you need to apply that thinking as you're doing it, and then give yourself room to grow in your mind, and that positive self-talk comes into play. When you start getting frustrated, maybe the answer will be to walk away for a minute and then come back and try again when you're ready with a fresh mindset. And then the second thing that you're going to have to do is you're going to have to do some hard work. But it's not the kind of work where you muscle your way through it. At times, you're going to have to hold your power back, and at times, you're going to have to push your power ever so forward with great carefulness and gentleness. So you're kind of restraining your power through the process. Are you ready to understand how? I'm going to show you. Here we go. The first step is for me to take a ruler and to place it on my paper, as seen here. Next, you want to take a pencil or a colored pencil, and I suggest you start with a regular pencil first. And you're going to trace that ruler on the top and the bottom, holding it very still. I like to go ahead and get this end here. Now, some of you may have a ruler that ends at 12. You can just outline the entire ruler if you want. I'm going to make sure I go past 10 inches. And then I'm going to lift it up, and I'm simply going to give myself a mark here. Now, from that point, I'm going to go in inches. Now, when I read the ruler, I see 1, 2, 3, and I see a long line behind. Children, that is 1 inch there. You've probably gone over this with your regular classroom teacher in class. But in a way, this is a sense of measurement or math combining with art. And all I'm doing are making some square inches here. So I'm going 1 inch across pretty much. I can move my ruler down. Some rulers are different than others in terms of having that line, but I'm just making another mark at those long inch points. And that's going to allow me then to draw some vertical lines to create the square inches I need. So I turn my ruler and I just outline like this. I'm going to go into the time-lapse mode now so you can see what I'm doing. Now, children, you can see in my previous 2 examples that I've already completed, my 10 is the darkest my pencil can make, and then 0 is the white of the paper. And the idea here is you control your tool in grades of darkness. So your darkest dark you can possibly make is going to be your 10. And 0 is going to be the white of the paper. And it doesn't really matter if you're dealing with color or if you're dealing with a gray pencil. So what I want you to do is, after you make your ruler reading like this, 0 to 10, we're going to start with 10 and we're going to push as hard as we can. And what you want to do is you want to hold your pencil this way. And you don't want to, your first layer, you don't want to push as hard as you can against the paper, but you do want to apply some firm pressure. And I'm going to model that now. And I'll go back to the time lapse and show you how I deal with number 10. It's important to keep in mind that when we go, from 10 backwards to 0, 10 is actually easier to do than 1, 2, and 3, say. Your hardest one, the hardest squares to do are really 1 to 5, I think, because you really have to hold your power back. And that's a whole different way of thinking than pushing as hard as you can for, say, 10, 9, and 8. You'll see what I mean as you start to do the process. It's harder to hold the power back and shade at light tone than it is to shade at dark tone. Children, additionally, I'm going to use this separate piece of paper as a bridge so I don't smear my drawings underneath my hand while I'm working. Children, this isn't exactly perfect, but it does give you an idea of what is needed in terms of practice and this exercise to achieve a greater sense of understanding when it comes to controlling your tool. And you'll notice that a lot of times I started to get in this lighter area, and my answer was to go back and make some of 4, 5, and 6 darker to balance out, because sometimes we find that we're dealing with tone 1, 2, or even 0, and it changes what we thought was right before. So never be afraid to go back in different passages of your drawing. I'm going to show you now a drawing where all of this has been used to really make the drawing have great impact. And I think you're going to find it pretty eye-opening. So before we close out this video, I also wanted to bring to your attention how is value already happening in our art classroom. Well, here's a tessellation by a 5th grader in my art classroom, and you can see she was doing a tessellation design. She turned it into a like an elf, and she's shading. And if you look closely here, okay, you can see how even in the white hat there, she's using a sense of purple to show where some light is kind of not hitting that white fluffy part of the hat as much. And that's a way of using value. And it's real subtle, it's holding your power back, but look at the effect that is achieved when we glance at the artwork. We know there's something more than just coloring going on here. Another great example is this linear drawing of a house that is either, kind of having the sun come up behind it or the sun is setting. And if we pay attention to this tree, you can see how this student did a great job of applying light green to dark green. And she's trying to show those transitions of light to dark. So really great work there in her beginning journey. So I want to remind you that there were 3 steps to understanding value. The first one was how we hold our tool. So if we're holding our tool here, we are applying more dark pressure. If we hold it in the back, that's better for lighter pressure. And then pressure was the other thing, is the amount of power you push when you're shading, and then also your layers. So some approaches you might have to, it might require many layers. Like this drawing seen back here, it's only in blue, but there's so many layers and pressures and how I held my pencil to achieve so many different passages here. It really was an exercise in itself to understand value more from my own understanding. So I hope you keep the positive self-talk going on in your mind. And remember, you can do more than you ever imagined that's possible. You have to believe in yourself, and you have to keep that positive self-talk going. And this has been another edition of Mr. Hale's Visual Art Expeditionary Force. And I'm signing off for now. Boop, 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 boop.